Hey, what's going on, guys? We have a special guest here today. We have Sang Kim. He's the co-host for the Health is Wealth, and we're on episode 11 of the hashtag Clocked In with Health is Wealth. And today we're going to be diving into the world of Bitcoin. Whether you're under 30 and tech savvy or you're over 50 and curious about the future of money, this episode is going to be for you. I want to note that this is not financial advice. It's only for education and entertainment purposes only. Saying, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm up here in London, Ontario, Canada. We got a little bit of snow outside, but it's, fairly mild. It's above zero, maybe about 2 degrees Celsius. And I just got back from a curling match. So that was kind of cool. And we won today. And I
Oh,
hit vegan.
congratulations.
So this was
Congrat-
good. Yeah,
Congratulations. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, it's been chilly here in Tampa as well. About 45 in the morning, 60 during the day. But let's dive into the Bitcoin and why Bitcoin's been super relevant as of recent. I mean, it's been around since 2008 when Nakamoto wrote the white paper. At that point, it was something of no one really knew what it was. He just kind of put it out there. Some criminals were using it because that's how early acceptance kind of works with stuff. And then it became more of a suitable solution to some of the issues going on today.
It's one of these things. If you're under the age of 30, you probably watched a ton of videos on Bitcoin. And if you're over the age of 50, you probably heard about it, but maybe you haven't invested in it yet. But you're thinking that it's in front of the news almost every day, right?
Yeah.
So it's relevant, right? And being a former portfolio manager, it's something that you have to have an opinion on and address, right? But there's no question in my mind that it's here to stay. It's a real investment. It's a real asset class. It's and we can get it. We'll dig a little bit deeper, but it's not this this overnight success type of thing,
Yeah.
it's been trading ever since I believe it was January 2009, I believe, where the
Yes.
first trade actually was done, right?
Yeah.
So what's that, right? We're going to be coming up on what's that, 15 years,
Yeah.
right? It's going to be almost 16 years that it's been in existence. And I learned about it first. I was at a Tony Robbins event, the finance conference with the Platinum Partners. So this was February 2018. And there was
Okay.
an expert panel talking about Bitcoin in
Really?
2018. And Bitcoin was trading, uh, let's say it was trading somewhere from $7,000 to $9,000 at that time. And today, it's trading over $100,000 today in US dollars, of course, right?
Yeah.
So, that's more than a 10x,
In
right?
6 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, this is really interesting, right?
Yeah. 100%. 100%. For me, I actually got introduced in, I believe it was 2017.
Mhm.
But what was going on then at that time was everyone was rushing to all these other cryptocurrencies. So you
Yes.
would buy the Bitcoin and then you would transfer to the other currencies to try to get
Yes.
a meme coin or whatever it is to have a
Yeah.
50x return. And what people didn't realize was, I mean, a good amount of Bitcoin, like millions, there's only 21 million of them. So it basically the way
Correct.
it works is you have to mine for it, which basically means it's like an algorithm where you have to go in, you have to have these supercomputers, and basically if you get the code correct, you get rewarded.
Correct.
And it's been going on since the existence, since it's originated. And there's only 21 million of them. And what would end up happening is there would be these miners. So the crypto miners would go and do the codes, and they would get rewarded. And sometimes they would get rewarded. You always get the same distribution, but there's this thing called the halving. So the halving happens every 4 years. The fourth one happened in April of this year. And what that means is that the rewards that the miners get are cut in half. So what that means is that it's a supply shock thing. So it stops rewarding as much because it's going to take longer and longer to get to the last 21 million total. I believe there's 19 million out right now, but then there's been reports of at least several million that are lost. Just lost because people didn't know the codes, people didn't know how to keep the information. And then as of recent of this year, the financial institutions started taking it on and it became
Yeah.
ETFs and they started underwriting it and doing all of these different things. And the so saying for you from your perspective, what do you think the real reason that Bitcoin's like catching attention? Why are people interested in this?
Yeah, like when you think about it, right, as the US economy, the Federal Reserve and the Bank of Canada as well started to really print a lot of money, right? So basically devaluing the US dollar, the Canadian dollar,
Yes.
by printing more money in circulation, right?
Yes.
So really, when you think about it, when there's more dollars out in circulation, it doesn't have the same value that it did before they printed the money. So,
Yes.
so this printing of money effect and not having the dollar go as far. So now, people were thinking, well, is this going to continue, right? The printing of money, right? And devalue my dollar so I can't get as much stuff, right? Goods and services, purchasing power with this dollar, right? So I think especially the younger generation and the people in the in these niche markets like the gamers, right? I mean, they've been exposed to mining a Bitcoin for a long time because it's in the gaming environment, right?
Yes.
So it's a culture of mining and getting rewarded for this work, right? Where the mainstream people didn't really understood what that was all about. So really, it has to do with this trust issue. So the fact that there's only 21 million Bitcoin forever, it's been designed that way since the beginning, that there will not be any more Bitcoin after all of it's been mined, right? And like you said, there's 19 million plus Bitcoin that are out in circulation, and it's less than 2 million that's available to be mined, right? So
Yeah,
so
exactly. And a lot of
so
if you
there's a
look
lot of
into
trust there, right? There's
a
trust
hundred
in the
percent,
system and it's secure, right? And it's probably the one of the most secure systems from a asset protection perspective. Uh, you know, and I think there's so much more trust there than our governments.
yeah. And what I was
Period.
gonna get at was regarding the US from the US perspective, like I was just looking at pulling this fact up. So in 1929, the US debt was $17 billion in 1929. By the
Yeah.
time it got to 1982, that's the first time we hit $1 trillion of debt. Now, back in 2018, when you were telling us that that you found out about Bitcoin, there was $21 trillion in debt, and we were going up about a trillion a year in debt. Then
Mhm.
28 trillion, then 30 trillion, 33 trillion, and now there's I believe the numbers aren't out for 2024 yet, but I believe it's $39 trillion dollars. Now, what that does is that completely or 35 trillion, I apologize. But what that does is that completely devalues the money that you're holding in cash. So what that means is that if you're holding a lot of cash, like a lot of people are like, "Oh, I want an emergency fund and I feel comfortable when there's cash in my bank account." But if you're holding cash every single year, it's becoming worth less and less and less. And that happens when you go to the food store or when you go buy a house or you get a car and you start to realize that a ticket to an event is not $100 anymore. It's $200 or $400. And getting a car note, the average car note's like $700, which is just incredible. So you start to sit there and think to yourself, what can I do to protect the money that I've earned? You know what I mean? And by the end of this podcast, you'll understand what Bitcoin is, why it's important, and how it might fit into your life. So I just bring this up because I think it's so important for us to realize that there's so much that is underlying. It's not when I like when Sang grew up where it's just work a job, make enough money and you're good. Like it's getting to the point now where everyone has to invest. Everyone's got to do a lot of these things just to recoup because wages are not going up nearly as quick as other people are.
Correct, correct, right? And and if you look at, what is Bitcoin, let's look at that. And really, Bitcoin is digital money, and it's decentralized, and it's based on this blockchain technology, right? Where there is, this blockchain technology is is a code, and when you buy and sell Bitcoin, it is on this ledger, right?
Yeah.
And you
And
know who's bought it and who has sold it, and all the transactions. It's it's controlled not by the government, by itself. So the
and it's
system is intact. So it's decentralized, meaning that it is not run by a central group like a government organization or a company. So
and you're
that's
not
what the word
which
decentralized is
which
referring to.
limits a lot of the risk because now you don't have the CEO who did something wrong and gets arrested and now the stock plummets. There's no one there, so there's no ruling. The other big thing, the big transition that I've seen regarding Bitcoin is that people originally viewed it as digital money. They wanted to see a change there. But I think what's turning to it is digital capital or digital gold because
Yes,
now it's starting
absolutely.
to turn into something that it's like I'm not gonna pay for this. Like, it's not supposed to be a mode of transactions. And people, funny enough, back in the day, there was someone who they call it Bitcoin like pizza day. There was someone who spent 10,000 Bitcoin on a pizza and they got it
Yeah,
delivered to them. That was years ago. And the
yeah,
point is that Bitcoin isn't that anymore, but now it's more of a capital preserver for you. And there's people like
yeah.
Michael Saylor saying that he has estimates that he thinks it's going to go up 29% a year ARR over a 21-year period, which is unheard of in regard to markets going up.
Yeah, yeah, and I think yeah, that's bang on, right? So whether you consider Bitcoin a digital gold, and I think that's more likely right now. People are viewing that as a better way to have an asset class similar to gold, and it's got a store of value, right? And we know what game we're playing. There's only 21 million of them available, right? And I think when we see leaders like Michael Saylor making a commitment to hold Bitcoin, in a corporate environment and
Yes.
using that as an asset, it to me it makes a lot of sense. And I think with CEOs like Michael Saylor, I mean he is eventually it will become a platform for other uses, with Bitcoin being the asset
Well,
backing up,
I'm not sure if you saw
transactions.
that. Yeah, no, exactly. 100%. And the major thing is that a lot of people are they're like, I don't get Bitcoin. I'm not sure what it is. But when you start to realize that you can have something that goes up that much, and it's a lot like one of the big things about crypto is that it's not your keys, not your wallet, which is what a lot of people say. And what that basically means is that back in 2022, a lot of the banks were going under. And what that meant was that people had their money in their banks. A lot of them got the money returned, but it's still a delay and it's a scared thing where you don't know where to leave your cash. And so what a lot of people did, there was these ledgers where basically you're your own bank and you would put the information in and it's what you kept and it's how you keep. So a lot of people call it like cold storage. There's cold and warm. Warm is when you're on a platform, and then cold is when you put it on your own USB drive, and it's your own quote unquote bank account. And what people enjoy about that is the freedom to take it anywhere. You don't have to go, you don't go to on an airplane, you go with your ledger, no one says anything to you. If you go and buy a building, you can't just pick up the building and be like, let's go. So there's a lot of it leans very much into this freedom component that a lot of people are looking for, especially in the under 30 range, where it's like, dude, I don't want to be bogged down by all these things. Like there's so many responsibilities and there's so many different ways of looking at it. But to be sitting there with so many assets, like you get a car, cool. You got to go get the oil change. You got to do the maintenance. You get a house. You got to get a new toilet. You got the AC goes out. Any of the issues when you have the Bitcoin, it's just in the ledger and it makes a
Yeah.
yeah. So it's this point that a lot of people want freedom. A lot of people want to have this ability to leave with their assets. They want to be able to go on the spring of it. Like prices have never been cheaper than they are today. That's why you have so many people traveling. People don't want to have be bogged down by cars that have oil changes or houses that need a new AC or a new this or a new that. So the Bitcoin has such low maintenance on it, which makes it pretty incredible.
Yeah, like I said earlier, it's an asset class that's going to stay. I do believe that there's still a ton of upside on it. But the caveat here, right? What's the upside? What's the downside to Bitcoin? That it is very, very volatile. So if you are not an expert trader, with Bitcoin, I mean, it's very, very volatile, right? And even
Yeah.
if you're a buy and hold person, like, you could have bought it for 50 to, around 60,000, 50,000 back in, I think it was around
October.
2022, right? And
Even
then it
no, but
dropped,
even
right?
October, November. Yeah, it
Right?
literally
It
went down.
dropped and then it plateaued around 50 to 60,000 and then the next surge. So it's one of these things where I, I think there's a couple of things. It's important to understand just a little bit of technical analysis in the sense of where is Bitcoin on this charting, process, right? So that at least if you are a long-term buy and hold, if you understand where we are in Bitcoin, so likely we're going to see a bit of a correction here after we're up in the $100,000 range, right? So I think there'll be another entry point around probably the mid 80,000, right? So if you're looking to invest in it, and this isn't advice, right? So if you understand technicals, you may be able to find a better entry point for a buy and hold position. But for
Yeah.
long-term buy and hold position, I wouldn't be buying it over 100,000 at this point. I'd be a little bit more patient, you know,
Yeah.
and
But
get it
another
for.
it all depends on your time horizon and it depends on how you go about it. So like a super
Yep,
easy way to do anything is just dollar cost averaging. So if you've been maintaining
absolutely.
that dollar cost average, it really opens up a wide variety of easy ways to do it. And then even with like what do you think saying about all the ETFs and about like
Yeah.
financial institutions
Okay.
accepting it and BlackRock and all these different people? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great because you think about it, right? Now there's more buyers and sellers in the market. That is very healthy for cryptocurrencies, right? So we want more players trading it because now it's even more legitimate, right? And it's
Yeah.
accessible by institutions, right?
Yeah.
So if you're an institution, you can go buy, uh, the iShares Bitcoin ETF, right? And that's
Yeah.
IBIT, IBIT,
Yeah.
and it's over $30 billion of AUM right now, assets under
Which is
administration, right? So it's massive, right?
y-
But I think if you look at from a portfolio management perspective, right? So let's say you're working with a financial advisor. Well, and he or she is a portfolio manager. Well, you're not going to have 50% of your money in Bitcoin
Yeah.
in that portfolio because that's not how portfolio management works, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you decide to have a lot of Bitcoin, you make that personal decision, right? But it's not likely going to be working with an advisor because they won't allow you. I mean, the institutions will allow you to have 50% of all your investable money in that asset class, right?
Yeah.
So even if you don't know what Bitcoin is, but you sort of believe in it, like why not have 2 or 5% of your
Yeah.
investable assets in it as a way to have a different asset class? And I do personally believe it's better than holding gold.
Yeah.
And a lot of investors might have, gold has done very well this year. They might have 5% allocation in gold, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you've got 2 to 5% allocation in a Bitcoin ETF with your advisor. And I think,
Yeah.
and I
I
think
I
that's smart.
I actually had a Gary Cardone,
Yeah,
Grant Cardone's brother, on the podcast, and
yeah,
he's been really big into crypto, and he was talking about how he spoke to some financial advisors that what they were doing, they were actually taking people's retirements and plugging some of it into the ETF.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
he's like, the funny thing is that when people get the reports, those are probably going to be their best performing asset. So, so it's
Yeah,
the so they're going to want to buy
yeah,
more. So it becomes down to this thing of like, there's a set supply, and nobody can add to it. Nobody can
yeah,
delete it.
yeah,
So since there's no individuals interacting with it, it's this idea of like, whatever you do, if you do it long term, you obviously don't want to do anything short term, but if you do it long term, you could see some very outsized opportunities there.
yeah, absolutely. And if you're under the age of 30 and you understand Bitcoin, you've been through the big ups and downs, and you're patient and you're thinking about a long-term time horizon, like 20 years, 30 years of holding it and adding it, dollar cost averaging, I think you know, I think it'll outperform. I think it'll grow faster in 30 years than your condo in Tampa Bay. I think
Yeah,
it'll outperform it, like
a
hands down,
hundred, a
right?
hundred percent. So then you get into
Right.
this thing of like the way I view it is having multiple retirements. So I'm like, if you can get a certain amount, then you have another retirement window, which becomes very, very interesting because there's so many people who just you're not opening your eyes to like different opportunities and you want it to be super mainstream. But at this point, it's still fairly mainstream. But this is the first time where there's been an opportunity before the all of the guys on Wall Street got their hands on it. Like this is the first
Yeah.
time common people are able to get exposure to something, and
Yeah.
they're still not involved completely. So it gives you
Yeah.
this real opportunity of like, wow, like there
Yeah.
you could be way ahead of the curve because even the US, they were talking with Trump being elected, he's talking about having a reserve,
Yeah.
which would basically be, I mean, I believe they have like 200,000 Bitcoin at this moment that they seize through different platforms,
Yeah.
and they're gonna start buying, and if they start buying, and there's majority, I believe it's over 50% of Bitcoin hasn't moved in the past 2 years. And what that means is that a lot of people are just holding in cold storage. So a lot of people are not
Yeah.
selling this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, um, I- and people, it will become ubiquitous and easy to move, move the Bitcoin around even more so, right?
Yeah,
And, it's fairly, it's a lot easier now than it was like several years ago, right? But
100%.
but once again, right? Like if you're holding it in cold storage, like on a USB drive, and someone steals it, and you
Yeah.
have a couple of $1 million, well, guess what? there's a
Yeah.
risk factor there, right?
A
So
hundred percent.
put it put it put it in a safe, you know,
Yeah.
in a secure safe, like maybe even at a lockbox in a bank, right? A
Yeah.
safety deposit box. That's what I would do personally, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I've owned Bitcoin and Ethereum through ETFs because I just think it's for me, I feel safer. I'm more old school. It's safer for me, right? Like because just the thoughts of it having it cold storage and losing it. Oh my God, right? Like it's not without any risk, but I think you've got to manage the risk and do it and purchase it the way that you like to purchase it, what you're
But
comfortable with, right?
but like you were saying, it's becoming so much more accessible.
Yeah,
Like at this point, it's significantly more accessible, and there's many stocks on the open market that you could purchase that track it. You can get all of these different exposure points, so it becomes
exactly.
super, super interesting. Um, and I believe that's one of the reasons that it's becoming more and more accessible because people are starting to put their stamp of approval on it, and it becomes a very interesting point where there's no like I was talking with one of my mentors. He's 79 years old and he was like, I don't really understand it. He's like, the
Yeah,
biggest issue I had with it is that the government didn't back it. And now
yeah,
because that was the reason that people like the dollar and that's the people like the Canadian dollar and that's why people like the
that's
euro
right.
and all of these different
That's
things
right.
because government back them. But there's starting to be a trust issue with how they're allocating the funds.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? And it's one of those things, right? Like with investing, you have to, be comfortable with it, right? Everyone's different. Everyone has a different risk tolerance,
Yeah.
and everyone has slightly different values, and and you know, and then that's important because you have to understand how you make decisions,
Yes.
right? And you have to be in values alignment.
Yeah.
And if you are, um, if you're not a high risk taker and you don't understand Bitcoin, you know what? Don't invest in it, right? It's like any other asset class, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean it's wrong or right, but you do have to invest within your big three, right? Your risk tolerance, your time horizon. So when do you need the money, right? And also, for what goal is that money for,
Yes.
right? So when people give advice around money, you got to be so careful because it's usually out of context because you don't
Yes.
know the person's values, how they make decisions, if their risk tolerance, what they need the money for, their time horizon, right? So, and then that's why I'm a big fan of, people working with financial advisors
Yeah.
because it keeps you in the game when the markets are down. You want to pull money out, but they keep you in the game,
Yeah. It
right?
removes the emotional
It's
component of it.
exactly and it's all about, long term, you want to stay in the game because it
Yeah.
is very hard to market time. And that's why portfolio managers, if they like a position like Nvidia, they've got a long-term hold on it, right? And then they'll trade around it, right? So they'll take the
Yes.
profits off the table and they'll buy some more with maybe half of it, the top half of it, or maybe 20% of it, but they'll trade around the position, but they like the position. They've got a long-term buy and hold, right?
Yes.
So even if you're a trader, right, and you like the position, like in Nvidia, like I believe in Nvidia, right? So,
Yeah.
and then you trade around it, right? And
Yeah.
you can do that with Bitcoin too, as you become more sophisticated if you're a do-it-yourselfer, right?
Yeah.
You
A
know,
hundred percent. And the really interesting thing about Bitcoin when we start diving in it deeper, there's like a few different things that we also haven't touched on. We haven't touched on the crypto market's open 24/7. You can
yes,
do transactions on Saturdays and Sundays, and no one's
yes,
going, no, no.
yes,
It's huge. I mean, the fact that you can do all this stuff real time is insane.
yeah,
It also has no borders. So
Yeah.
like there's no constraints on the borders. And
Yeah.
obviously the upside opportunity is there as well. But I mean, you also got to be so it becomes very interesting when it's the first thing because we look at it just from our perspective, right? The US and Canada. But what about the rest of the world? There are countries that are utilizing this
Yeah.
so that they can get their currency in line because their
Yes.
currency, there's people that are literally in Africa where you will go to lunch, the burger, let's use a burger for example, is
Yeah.
$20. By the end of the meal, it's $25. And you're like, what? Because the currency is moving so fast. So
Yeah.
when you're in some of these high risk areas or there's countries that literally will take your money, they'll take your money from you. And
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
don't really experience that with the US or Canada. So it's just, these are the reasons that this is becoming accepted because a lot of people, it's out of necessity. They
Yeah.
need an alternative. And you
Yeah.
can't carry around 10 tons of gold. Like you can't carry it. Like it's a
Yeah.
pain in the butt to move. This is a very easy thing to move, but like you said, saying there's a lot of risk to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other, the other big benefit of Bitcoin is that you can transfer Bitcoin almost instantaneously to anybody around the world, right?
Yes.
And you just need to know a code, right?
Yeah.
You send you the code, you copy it, and then you send it to them, and it's in a secured system, right? And then they receive it. Whereas if you're trying to send money from Canada to Africa or Canada to Europe, there's a lot of fees, right? So there's
Oh,
transaction fees all the way to the end user,
because
right?
everyone's collecting on it. Yeah. I mean,
Exactly. So it's very, very efficient that way. And then
and you
that's
can,
where I just love the blockchain. And
yeah.
it's so cool, right? And
Yeah.
it's here to stay. And there will be some other, I mean, the US with Trump, I do believe they will have a digital US dollar in
Yeah.
some form, right? And it'll be even more efficient than the current way that money is moved.
Yeah, 100%,
So,
100%. But I mean, like you've mentioned before, and I don't think we really got into it, but so there's the halving, and then there's cycles. So Bitcoin will go up 500%, but on numerous occasions, it's dropped 80% in value. But
yes,
you start to
yes.
realize that and that becomes the buying opportunity because it's very interesting when people sit there and go, "Wait, isn't it at the top or is this the top or is this the whatever it is?" The main one you said is what is your risk tolerance? What's the time horizon? And when you
Yeah,
start to realize these different pieces, you realize that it's like, okay, if I dollar cost average where it's just a consistent $20 a day, $50 a week, whatever it is, then you have that consistent, it's building up for you.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so a
yeah,
100% because it can be very intense. Like it's at the point now where it's who is gonna drop 100 grand and buy a coin? Like, you know what I mean? Maybe, maybe not. It all really depends. But how many people even have that ability to do that? It's
yeah,
becoming more and more limiting where it's gonna be corporations, it's gonna be countries, it's gonna be these
yeah,
different people. But if you
yeah,
have some exposure to this, you can maybe be on the ride.
yeah, yeah. And as the U.S. start to formulate some more detailed regulations around crypto, and I think that is so healthy for the crypto market because
Yeah.
once again, the outcome of that is more trust in the crypto systems. So, and then you have more institutions coming in. And
Yes.
and like
And
Michael Saylor, right, that there will be more companies that will own Bitcoin
there's
on
a
the books, right? And we
yeah,
will see it in more countries, more
and
corporations. It's
ju
going to happen.
just to give a perspective, it's not just like because we keep saying it was so Michael Saylor runs this company called MicroStrategies, and I just want to give like two cents on this. So he's been running MicroStrategies back in 2020. He had about $500 million in cash, and his company does pretty well. And he's like, well, I could sell the company, or I could take a risk because we don't know what to do with this money because nothing's appreciating like fast enough to maintain the money. So what he decided to do was go in on Bitcoin. And at this point now, he has $40 billion in Bitcoin and about 50 or 60 million in US dollars. So my point being here is that he is all the way in. And what that does is now it trades as a proxy for other people who want to get exposure to it without they can't buy it. But the other big thing is, as you were mentioning with the regulatory uncertainty, by the by the big institutions doing the ETFs, that limits a lot of the risk. Like Gary, when he was on the podcast, he goes, I'd rather buy at 60 grand with limited risk of it being
Yeah,
like shut down or anything like that than
yeah,
buy it at 15 or 10 or 5 when you
yeah,
don't know what's going to happen to it.
exactly.
So it's a lot of the risk has been removed at this point
Correct.
for it. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. And that's a really good point, right? The people that were buying Bitcoin, even at $1,000 to $5,000, right? They were taking a big risk because the future was very uncertain at that point, right? So, but if you believed in the concept of it, like who are the twins? The Winklevoss twins.
Winklevoss, yeah.
Yeah, the Winklevoss twins, right? And they got in at 2012, right? After they sued Facebook, right? And took several $1 million worth. And I heard their story for the first time not too long ago,
Oh, really?
but they were on a beach somewhere,
In
right?
Ibiza.
Talking to some real nerdy guys talking about Bitcoin, and they made a compelling argument for the twins to invest in Bitcoin at that point in time. And they really liked the idea. So back in 2012, they invested millions of dollars into Bitcoin, and now they're billionaires now, right?
Yeah.
But they took some of their money, right, and took a risk,
Yeah.
right? But they believed in they believed in the white paper. They believed in the concept of it and the fundamentals of it, right? And they bought and held for a long time and took some profits along the way, but you know, you
I
know,
yeah, I
it's
think the major thing here is really understanding of like most people want to buy Bitcoin to get rich, right? That's what most people want to do. They want to make money. But when you start to look a little bit deeper on what Bitcoin is, you start to realize that it's a very freeing mechanism. It
yeah,
gives people a lot of independence and it allows them to do what they think's best because it is crazy that you do make money each day and you work your job and then it keeps getting devalued. Like it becomes a very interesting piece there where it
yeah,
starts to realize of like, what do you really want to do? How do you want to live your life? How do you want to do these things? And it's just the main reason of this podcast is to express the tippy iceberg of what is going on with Bitcoin and why it's relevant and why maybe you should spend another few hours looking into some of this stuff if it's something of interest. Because a lot of people aren't talking about this. There are a lot that are, but you just want to be in the know of like what's happening and what's going on right now because we're in a very exciting time and there's a lot of things that are changing. And if you're not in the front area, then by the time you see it, it might be $1 million and you might be, oh, I wish I had some like, and it's this thing of you never really know where anything's going. So you just have to be able to prepare and be situated for what you think is the best move.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And if prefer not to buy Bitcoin directly, like on a platform like Coinbase, or here in Canada, there's a couple of different ones, right? I've used Newton here in Canada, and yeah, and they've been around for a while, so it is a lot easier to purchase cryptocurrencies now. Yeah,
Yeah, but you can even buy it through the
so
ETFs. You could buy it on like Fidelity. You can do it on all of these different platforms. You just have to set up the crypto portion of it. But it's giving a lot of exposure to what is possible. And you start to realize that I hope this is just an intro to like what you guys start to realize is like, oh, maybe I should look into this a little bit more. Maybe I should learn a little bit more about this. Maybe I could see what's going on.
Yeah.
Because the amount of people who were like, yeah, I put 1% of my assets into this, and now that's 10, 20, 50% of their portfolio is so many. If you stayed in the game for 10 years, then it's absolutely. If you've been in the game for 4 years, it's absolutely, yeah, every 4 years since its inception, it's been going up.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, yeah, it's it is very interesting because I remember trying to understand Bitcoin when I first got exposed to it. I kind of went, oh my God, what the heck is this thing? But
And that's
it's
after 20 years in financial advising.
oh yeah, it was so hard to understand, right? So I started to do a lot of research on it, right? And to the point where I got comfortable and actually bought some through ETFs, right? And it's interesting, right? Because there's this fear part of the unknown, but when I started to read more and more about the fundamentals of it, right, and heard the story of why it was created and the use case for it, right, it just made more and more sense. And then I met Michael Novogratz. He runs a Galaxy. It's basically a company that is like a custodian and it does administrative services
Okay.
for financial institutions that want to sell Bitcoin, hold it, right? Be
Yeah.
a custodian for it. And he's a billionaire now, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. And he came from Goldman Sachs, but I met him in 2018, and he sort of made it even more legitimate for me, for a guy of his stature to leave Goldman Sachs and to go all in on crypto
Yeah.
by creating this platform
A
company.
a
Right.
100%.
Yeah, so that I just kind of went, well, he's a smart guy, and he's done really, really well. And actually, the first crypto ETF in the world was actually created in Canada
Oh,
with
wow.
purpose investments through an ETF, right? So it was a purpose Bitcoin ETF in the entire world. So it was traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange.
Oh,
So
wow.
institutions could have got exposure to it, to the first ETF, right? In the,
Absolutely. The other
yeah,
thing I forgot to mention is that the creator of it, the white paper,
yeah,
Satoshi Nakamoto,
yeah,
he's anonymous.
yes,
So he
correct.
literally created this and then disappeared.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think when people hear that, they go, "What? What do you mean he
yeah,
disappeared?"
yeah,
So
exactly.
that's the craziest thing is that it's got nothing to do with him. So there's no individuals that can some like get in trouble or do anything wrong that could ruin it because it's just technical. It's just a software that runs on its own.
Yeah,
And then there's the miners and there's the people who interact with it and everyone's just utilizing different avenues to get involved with it. But it was this idea of like the fact that it went from a few pennies or less than a few pennies to even dollars is insane. The
yeah,
fact now that it's at
yeah,
$100,000 is like it's very to me, someone under 30, it's very much proven. And I think that there will be definitely more acceptance of it.
yeah, yeah. I find it's fascinating. So when I first heard about this idea of Bitcoin mining, so these actual, nerdy guys that have bought a whole bunch of these computers, fast computers, to mine for Bitcoin, right? And
Yeah.
to me, that was fascinating, right? Solving a math problem, and these
Yeah.
computers are solving these math problems, and when they solve them, they get rewarded, right?
Yes.
It was like a video game, right? Literally, just like a video game, right? And then I thought, holy mackerel, right? And then I kept thinking from the business case, okay, what are their expenses, right? You got computers, you set them up,
The
you got
electric bill.
electricity, right? So they consume a lot of electricity. So if you can be near a power plant or free electricity, from solar to hydro, nuclear even better, right? Like like the big AI companies, right? They're collaborating with nuclear companies, right, for their data centers. But you thought, holy geez, yeah, this is legitimate, right? And the fact that there are publicly traded Bitcoin mining companies too.
Yes, Mara.
So this whole ecosystem has been around for a number of years now, and it's like very, very fascinating, right?
A
It's
hundred
very
percent. And
cool. I
you
just
bring
love
up
it.
a you bring up a major point that when you start getting exposed to something new, you think, "Oh my God, where has this been? How did this happen? How did I not hear about this?" And like you're saying, there's a lot of stuff going on around this, and a lot of people are talking about it, and they've been talking about
Mhm.
it for many years. As it's
Yeah,
coming up on its 15th, 16th year.
yeah,
So I think it's something awesome. Saying, do you have any final thoughts?
yeah. Like, I just think hopefully, for the listeners out here, if they haven't, invested into Bitcoin, now might be the time to look into it a little bit deeper. Or if you have owned some Bitcoin, I do think there's some good entry points, for the long-term buy and holds, right? But hopefully you got a little taste of it and maybe it's motivated you to dig a little deeper and to understand it a little bit more. And yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And guys, what are your thoughts for the audience? What are your thoughts on Bitcoin? Are you already invested or are you just curious? Let us know. You can shoot me an email at jordan@edwards.consulting, and I'd love to hear about it, and we could bring it up on the next Health is Wealth.